Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, it is Friday the 20th of May, 2022, and some interesting things are happening. Obviously, like on the political front, um, really fucked up, annoying shit. I mean, there's some good stuff. There are some candidates who the sort of air quotes mainstream Democrats were trying to suppress who've just won their primaries, which means they'll either be going into Congress or at least some of them, including in Kentucky. I mean, the I can't think of her name anymore. The woman who they had running a few years back against Mitch, a couple years back, was so bad. And when you look at, like, you put her side by side with Booker, and she was running as like a Trump Democrat, if that makes sense as a thing. Basically, like she had a shit ton of money from across the country, because obviously Mitch is fucking horrible. It needs to be replaced. I literally thought, I didn't just like in passing think about moving to Kentucky to try to fight Mitch. I got a job offer at the University of Kentucky to teach robotics there, and I was on the fence about going. I went for an interview, and had a thing where I could have taught the class. They were going to create one for me, and then I could have worked there. And while I was there, my goal was going to be campaigning and doing everything I could to undermine and to really replace Mitch. He's a bad guy, yeah. I mean, he's very effective. Very, like, he did get didn't make Obama a one-term president, but he was able to steal a Supreme Court seat, and in fact several. I mean, getting Trump elected was something that he was instrumental in, and just generally, I mean, you can go through the lists. Horrible person all around. Effective, not even really effective as a legislator, but effective as sort of a, I don't know what the fuck he is. Whatever the fuck he is. Anyway, though, Booker, much better. And this person who the Democratic, I hate to use the word establishment because it's one of those things that sounds like almost conspiratorial thinking, but it really just means people like, tragically, Obama is one of them. Biden is certainly one. Schumer, he's one of the more benign, but yeah, the kind of, yeah. And then you get Pelosi, who's awful, and you could just go through a list, especially of the octogenarians, but Bernie being a notable exception. But anyway, Booker won the primary. It would be fucking fantastic if he wins the general. It's hard, it's Kentucky. But if he wins and the essentially Trump Republic Democrat lost, to me it seems like maybe time to reconsider your fucking stupid strategy. I mean, I've never understood this Republican light strategy. Your Democrats, if people want to vote for Republicans, they're going to vote for Republicans. Why would they take Republican light? And I mean, there are so many, like, I don't know if it's naivete or what, but there are so many people who sit there and they take the stuff, which is obviously bad faith bullshit, that Republicans say, and they take it at face value, and it just annoys the shit out of me. I was just, oh my God, I love and have been a longtime listener and I guess contributor in the sense of paying like $100 a year for Slate Plus since it came out, of the Slate Gabfest, the political Gabfest. And I like the show, but I was just listening to it yesterday, and David Plotz is on there. And I know, I do understand, like, he partly sees part of his job there as, throwing out like random, air quotes, controversial stuff, trying to like stir the pot and so on. I don't think this was that. I think this is actually him saying what he thinks. And I'm the more disappointed by John Dickerson agreeing with him here, but they were talking about how the Supreme Court standards of, like not releasing documents, not releasing decisions when they're in draft, not protesting in front of justices' homes should be maintained. And the problem is, like, I do understand in the abstract, yeah, you want to maintain the norms of these institutions, and those norms are largely what makes things work. There's so much stuff. I think one of the things that Trump has really revealed, and the current era has really revealed, is that so much of how our government and how our country function is not based on the source code. It's not based on the Constitution or our laws, but it's literally just based on people behaving within the bounds, putting themselves within the guardrails, and not exceeding those out of shame or some sense of responsibility, or who knows what the reasoning is. But whatever it is, that's the thing. So you have these people, and they're sitting there talking about how we have to maintain these norms. The norms don't exist. The norms are gone. And it's not a recent thing, to be fair. Like, Clarence Thomas is such a fuckwad. And he was, compared to this new batch, he's actually not terrible. Although I've heard multiple Supreme Court scholars say that whenever there's an opinion and there's like a weird dissent that's horrible, always by Thomas. But he's a fuckwad, right? And then we have these new, like Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, and you just look at these people and they're like, I don't know. The fact that the Federalist Society looked at the Supreme Court and saw that it was making decisions that they didn't like, and in fact, they weren't political. They came up with this concept, not just they, but people came up with this concept of, air quotes, legislating from the bench. And what that really meant was that justices like Sandra Day O'Connor, who was nominated by Reagan, if memory serves, and basically is a Republican, these people would come up with decisions that they didn't like because they were trying to follow those norms and make the right decision under their understanding of the Constitution, of the law, and all of this kind of thing. They were weighing the cases and actually making, to the best of anyone's ability, impartial decisions, even if they disagreed with them, which I think is the mark of, I'm not a legal scholar, I'm not like well-versed in philosophy of law, but to me, if you're going to be a judge, one of the things that is a measure of your impartiality, in some sense, is that you don't agree with your own decisions sometimes. You might think like, well, I would rather the decision be X, but based on the facts and the circumstances and all of this, I have to go Y. And I do think that there's some limit to that. Like, there is a ethical and moral standard where, like, if your conclusion based on all of that stuff was that, something horrible had to happen, maybe, you stand up against it. But generally speaking, I think you might say, like, you're not for this thing, you don't generally support it on your personal level, but you think this is the conclusion based on the Constitution, your reading of past cases, the arguments that were made, and so on. And I think, at least by that measure, Sandra Day O'Connor was a pretty good justice, and Clarence Thomas is a piece of shit, just raging fucking shithead. And then, Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett and any of these Federalists, not just justices, but judges, they're all essentially created in a lab to do the thing they were accusing the Democrats of doing, which is legislate from the bench. And they were, just cultivated for their entire career. It's such a fucked up, sick thing to sit there and recruit people, at pretty much the undergrad level even, and guide them through being, able to go through a career that gets them to the Supreme Court or other federal courts and pass the confirmation process, and basically not to reveal, like, nod, nod, wink, wink where they are, but not to reveal too much in anything that they said or did, or their past decisions if they, are kind of riding up the ranks. And so, yeah, you have, I don't know, you look at the situation, and to me, the Supreme Court is currently not legitimate. I don't think there's any way to look at it and think this is a honest. They're not implementing the things that they're supposed to do. They're not making decisions based on case law or facts or anything like this. They're pulling out archaic witch trial era kind of things as precedents. From people who would convict women of being witches and have them killed. That's kind of the level that they're stooping to here. And you look at that, and it's just hard to look at that and say, yeah, we have to just keep maintaining those norms and not do anything that's beyond the pale, and we need to, the ship has fucking sailed, right? The ship has sailed. You're not in a position, none of us are in a position to say like, oh, we just have to be nice and follow the rules. You're playing, and I picked this one because I know David Plotz likes soccer. We're playing soccer. We're out there, we're in our uniforms, we're dressed, playing by the rules, doing our best, giving it our best. And they're out there, the opposing team, mining the field, tossing grenades at us and RPGs, doing, they have flamethrowers, they have machine guns, they have machetes, and we're just sitting there trying to play a game of soccer. And then a couple of people are like, maybe we should actually act accordingly. And then David's out there going like, nah, let's just keep playing. We need to maintain the standards of the game and, play honorably and continue. It's not, I wish it was where we are. And the thing that's frustrating for me about this is that people like this are not stupid. He's not, he's very well read. He's, I think, a relatively, well, he does say he doesn't introspect that much, so I don't know if that, but I think generally speaking, it's fair to say he's a relatively deep thinker, and he's somebody who has opinions that are not just completely ill-considered as a general rule. But you just look at this and it's just like, come the fuck on. Like, we're not there. You might want us to be there. You might wish that we were there. You might want to pretend that we're there. We're just not there. That's not the situation. It's not the battle that we're fighting. It's not the war that we're in, and we're not able to do that. I mean, if you do that, you're guaranteed to be just massacred. And so, I mean, this gets back to the title of today's episode is Redistricting. And the reason I wanted to pick redistricting, it's one of these things, like, it's very boring, and it's part of the sort of nuts and bolts of elections. And it's one of these things also where, I mean, everybody knows about gerrymandering. I think that's pretty well known. And you probably, if you're paying attention at all, you probably know that there are very good systems, depending on your metric, but good in terms of capable systems of drawing heavily gerrymandered maps that look reasonable. Because it used to be historically that the gerrymandered maps would have like these weird discontinuities, or they'd like stretch and blob, and they'd do like wrap around the city, and then you'd have another. You'd see things and you'd just look at it and you'd be like, "There's something fishy there." New technology with a lot of data and powerful computers has let us design maps that are just as gerrymandered, if not more so, but which look like things that you might just reasonably decide. And it's kind of a problem because it makes it that much harder. But we had Democrats running the state, and somehow, the state being New York, somehow they fucked this one up very badly. And just, I mean, part of it, don't get me wrong, I don't feel bad about things like Jerry Nadler, who frankly needs to just get the fuck out of Congress. He's one of many, many, I would call them establishment Democrats, who just is a net negative and is really just standing in the way of progress. he's now up against another incumbent because now the new districts are, wonky, and he's not the only one. And this means, it's kind of good in some sense because it does mean that some of these incumbents are going to eat each other and we'll end up having fewer incumbents, but it also means that you probably lose Democratic seats. And the thing is, like, partly I want to laugh at them, and partly, the fact that they're like not defending voting rights. I mean, even it's really sad. Even if you look at the John Lewis Act or bill, this does not begin to address many of the things that the Republicans in state legislatures have done. Now, the Democrats can't even pass that, and they've had other watered down versions that they can't pass. But the year is eclipsing. Like, we're in the primary season, and November, it's May now. November is a blink away. And it just seems almost inevitable that the Democrats are going to lose at least the Senate, if not both the Senate and the House, so they'll at least maybe lose some seats. And that's independent even of fucking up the districts and all of these state legislatures which have passed things which basically, they're varying extents of letting them decide, the outcome of elections, to just outright being able to say, well, we don't like the electors that the people voted for, and we're going to pick another set, which is as bad as the Electoral College is. It makes things even worse. And so we have no real protection of that. That's like independent of that. So we have no real protection of voting rights. The Voting Rights Act is basically gutted. Also, thank you, Supreme Court. And we have no new protections coming in. We have no protections for free and fair elections. Basically, like, in terms of democracies in the world, we're kind of on the downslope. And it's really fucking scary, frankly. You look at this and it's like, the Republicans are not playing the same fucking game that you're playing. And I'm sorry, going out and protesting in front of a Supreme Court justice's house and making their lives generally, they're not even going to be miserable, just making them face some consequences for the shit that they're doing. And generally speaking, like, if you took me in the abstract and you said, okay, well, Scott, what do you think? The Supreme Court should be, part of the reason that they have life terms is that that's supposed to elevate them beyond politics. Like, they should be thinking about things and making decisions like the ones Sandra Day O'Connor made, or at least some of them, which don't agree with their party, and they're just making but the problem is now, because there's no rule that was laid out that really constrains them, there's no real disciplinary action. They can be, technically, they can be impeached. And I say technically because it's like one of these things, like, technically we can amend the Constitution, but we're so far from being able to do that. Like, the ERA, I lose track of where that stands. It's had to be re-upped a few times in Congress, and I think we're down to like one state legislature needs to pass it to ratify it. But this has been how many decades? So many it's been so long since it's been in the flow that it's now looking antiquated. And by the time maybe it will get ratified, but by the time it does, it now is kind of sounding a little bit exclusive and not really covering, trans women. It's not really doing a lot of stuff for just people in general. It's good, don't get me wrong. And if I was in a state legislature voting for it, I would jump at the chance. But yeah, and this is kind of maybe a success story eventually, although, yeah, for some measure of success, some definition of it. So anyway, you just look at this and it's like, if the Democrats aren't going to do the things that make it easier for the Democrats to win, on one hand, like, in the abstract, I just want to, there's a part of me that wants to just kind of sit back and watch things burn and laugh at them because, yeah, they're fucking themselves. The problem with that is that it's not like, oh, just a bunch of people blowing themselves up through their own stupidity. It's that a lot of other people are going to be hurt and fucked over in the process. And a lot of damage is going to get done. And frankly, you know, I mean, even I, cis, het, white dude, even I will be in worse shape because of all of this shit. And if I was not any of those categories, if I was someone who was in a category that is systematically, you know, suppressed or harmed, I'd be in deep shit right now. And it's just such a fucked up situation. And it's so, I don't know, I mean, you look at it and frankly, on so many different fronts, like whether it's the Supreme Court or whether it's like Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein and so many other people who frankly just should not be in office. Fucking Biden. Biden should not have had a political career after his fuck up in the 80s. Just brazenly plagiarizing shit. Connie Chung is sitting there and it was just humiliating for him. And if we had standards, then this would have been it. Like he'd maybe have to go off and be, you know, maybe he could be a civil servant someplace, but probably, you know, like he's managing a post office or something. And instead, this is a person who became vice president, was a senator, became president. And, you know, you look at this and it's just like, how are there no fucking consequences? People, the way that people act here is like, we have 10 people you could pick from. And the pool is so small that you can't throw anyone out because, yeah, you're just slim pickings. In reality, we have 330 million people. And even if you cut that down to the people who are, say, over 35 and natural born citizens who are actually eligible to run for, you know, federal office, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of fucking people. It's not like you could cut out 90% of that set or 95% of that set. You know, have some fucking standards, and it'd be fine. And to me, I mean, somebody who's going to plagiarize, I understand that right now plagiarism is not looked at as a massive thing. Like people are like, oh, it's just, what is that even? The intellectual property and all of that. And the thing is, I mean, part of the problem is you have companies like Disney who are getting control of things that should have been long since put into the public domain. So they've got this stranglehold on IP, and then people see that and they're like, oh, that's bullshit. And they kind of overcorrect, I think, to like, oh, well, we don't have to give any attribution for anything. And even though someone worked to make something, they don't need, you know, you can just crop out their name on that watermark and just have the thing and then reshare it. You can, I mean, they're a little, this is not even quite plagiarism, but I'm a big fan of like showing your references and crediting people. And so not even just plagiarism, but if somebody says something on Twitter, often enough you'll see somebody will screenshot that and then they'll reshare the image without any kind of link to the person who said it, which means that like if the name is there, you can find them, but otherwise it's a pain in the ass and it's an extra barrier for no reason that keeps you from being able to do that. And so anyway, it's just it's a situation. And I think just in terms of basic ethics and morality, I don't think it's it's something that should matter. Having, you know, being an honorable justice, not being a Kavanaugh or an ACB or a, you know, Alito, or just not being any of these fucking people, not being a fucking, I can't even think of his name, Clarence Thomas, not being these people should matter. Not being Elon Musk, you know, I mean, frankly, this motherfucker, like, I hate talking about, it's so annoying that there are so many things that I can't help but talk about. Well, I mean, I could obviously help but talk about them, but they're things that are just constantly like there gnawing at me. And just like Trump deserves 0 cycles. Like, there should be no thought. I shouldn't even know who the motherfucker is. Like, maybe he's a guy that I saw a picture of in the 80s and he was in Home Alone thing as a cameo, and boy, that was kind of dumb, but haha. And there was a Quantum Leap episode about someone who was kind of like quasi-Trump as a kid, and okay, that's maybe the most brain space that he should have, that he should occupy. Elon Musk, and don't get me wrong, I like some of the things about Tesla. I have a Tesla, and the pickup is pretty cool. There are nice things about it. Overblown AI, or machine learning, I would call it. But, yeah, some nice things. SpaceX does some very cool things. And then you look at the dude, though, and just a raging piece of shit. Like, he just apparently, I mean, this is funny. Funny, hot, not, But, and this is one of those things, like, there should be consequences for being a bad person. I'm not necessarily saying you should get rewards for being a good person either. But, yeah, there should be, and the thing that's annoying about this is there is no inherent justice in the universe. I don't believe, I love the idea, don't get me wrong, of karma, of having, like, if you do good things, then good things happen to you. If you do bad things happen to you. And I always say this, but I'm not in any way jealous of people who are religious, to be fair. But this is just like a slightly hyperbolic statement. But if there was one thing that I kind of am almost slightly a little bit jealous of, it's that they can feel like Mitch McConnell will burn in hell or will face some kind of consequences for being a raging dick. That Clarence Thomas will face some kind of consequences because they're for damn sure not facing any now. That Donald Trump will face, I mean, so on and so on. It's one of these things that just irritates the shit out of me. And the world itself, like, we could make it a paradise. We could make it a place where ethics and morality matter. It is literally in our hands. We can totally decide to just do that. We can totally decide that, if people want to not do stupid work that is not producing anything and is literally just wearing them down and wasting their time for no good reason, we could do that. Like, I get obsessed with this thing, but we're so close in many ways to a post-scarcity society. And when you look at even the people who actually do hard work that our lives depend on, like the people who are picking celery, and you look at how much they're working and how much they're getting paid and how much the celery costs and all of this kind of stuff and the supply chain for that, they could be paid much more. They could have much better working conditions. They could have sick pay, they could have retirement, all kinds of things. And not have to work as hard. We could afford that. And the cost of celery would increase negligibly. This is the thing that's the most annoying thing about this at all to me, because it's not like it's going to make a stalk of celery be $50. It's not going to be, that was weird. I was going to say 15 and then I changed it to 50. It's not going to be $50 for a stalk of celery. It would be like a penny more or a few cents more. Or maybe, like, if you want to get crazy, let's make it a dime more. 10% more even, let's say. And you look at this and it's just like so fucked up. It's just greed upon greed. Like, people have to take every tiny bit of potential profit out of this stuff. And who gives a fuck if people are getting sick in the sun, working hard, having their fingers damaged by doing, this repetitive stuff, getting torn up by weeds, getting exposed to toxic chemicals and whatnot. As long as you're making the maximum amount of profit, that's good. I mean, like Ayn Rand, whatever the fuck her name is, the welfare queen, has convinced people somehow, and it's depressing. I mean, this is one of those things, like, she died getting supported by the state that she was railing against. And yet her legacy has been that people think, There's virtue in just maximizing, like being as selfish as possible. Being the 80s era Gordon Gekko, saying like, greed is good. You know, that's the virtue right now. It's how fucked up our world is that people think this. And it's not just, I mean, this neoliberal consensus thing. It's just one of these things that just makes me lose my fucking shit. Because you have, after a couple years, we finally got the post office to be sending people home tests. And we just even got, I just ordered a batch. There's a new thing out. You can get the second set, or I guess it's now the third set. At this time, they're sending 8 per household. Which, again, is kind of silly because, you know, let me order how many I need. If I have 5 people in my household, 8 is still not that much. If I'm just me, 8 is a lot, you know? But you look at this and then it's like, well, okay. The people who are doing this, rather than having a government-run company do it, or even a worker-run company if you want to go crazy, rather than having it be something that is regulated and produced by a nationalized corporation that specifically is set out to do this and do it efficiently and do it well and have good quality controls and have some kind of accountability, because of this whole neoliberal consensus thing, they subcon this stuff out to competitive bidders, and so a bit of a misnomer to call them competitive bidders, but they let people bid on this shit, and then they get a bunch of tax money, and then they send out tests, and then my mom and sister get their 4 tests, and they're all missing reagent or some component that makes the tests completely unusable. Yeah, that's where we are. They send out the tests, and you have the fucking White House press secretary acting like, you know, like, what are we gonna do? Send out tests? Send out free tests to everyone? Yeah, this is a person who, of course, is getting not just an antibody test, not just an antigen test rather, but getting probably rapid PCR tests for free on the taxpayer dime, probably on a daily basis. And, you know, like, those people are gonna get free tests, little free, cheap, not that sensitive antigen tests that don't get recorded and end up weakening our surveillance and all that. But, you know, and this is too much for her. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I just, and then again, like the whole situation is, if it was just them independently, you could just watch the party sail its ship over the edge of the world and good riddance, right? But the problem is, so many people are going to be fucked. Whether it's abortion, whether it's same-sex marriage, whether it's a lot of other things that they're going to end up fucking with, whether it's just, you know, like little, I mean, these fucking micro penis guys with their giant white trucks and the Trump flag and the Nazi desaturated flag with the blue stripe. If those guys are out there and they just decide to start fucking people over, well, yeah, what are you gonna do? And when I say that, it sounds like some abstract future thing, but I mean, right now you have people going out to a supermarket and shooting people because they're black, because they're white nationalist fucks who are, you know, fueled and hocked up on this like bullshit replacement theory crap. And it just like, I don't know, it just annoys me. It just, like, it does not have to be this way. We could do something about it. And you just see yourself on a train. And I feel the same way. I'm kind of exhausted. I am, like, my insomnia is a problem. And I don't think that it's not totally independent of the situation, the circumstance. But I'm kind of exhausted, and I have been exhausted since 2016, because you see this Trump shit, and you're sitting there screaming like, Hillary could lose, and everybody's like, come on, Scott. Of course she's got it in the bag, you know? And now, I mean, frustratingly, everybody's like, oh, of course I knew that she could lose, but everybody, you know, it's like, it's interesting everybody now says, of course they knew, when anyone that I would ask then would think that it was crazy that she might, the idea that she might lose didn't even seem to register for a lot of people. But never mind that now. Not that I'm bitter. Not that I'm annoyed by it. But I've been just exhausted since then because it's like we're on a fucking train. I see the goddamn cliff down there and it's getting closer and the conductor seems to be putting on speed. And I'm sitting there going like, should we maybe consider like slowing down or stopping? And nothing's happening. And the worst thing is, it's like, why are you being shitty to the Democrats, Scott? Why are you undermining Biden? Why are you undermining your representatives? Why are you undermining the bald fuck astronaut guy who is your senator, kind of? Incidentally, about this dude, I can't stand the motherfucker, and it's not like he is better than Sinema. Don't get me wrong. Definitely better than Sinema, but it's like Biden is better than Trump. The bar is subterranean. To clear that bar does not make you a good person. To be able to say you're better than Sinema, well, congratulations, 99.999% of the human race could say they're better than Sinema. 99.999% of the human race could say they're better than fucking Trump. But you know what? 99.998% of everybody could say they're better than you. And, I mean, whether it's fucking Mark Kelly or fucking Joe Biden, like, these are just worthless assholes. And again, I mean, this is why I lose my shit about the party. Because the party has essentially said, and you could see this, I mean, when Sinema had her primary, Deidre, who, I'm not claiming Deidre is perfect. Yeah. Deidre has some issues. I very happily voted for her in the primary, and I do think she would have been a better senator than Sinema. But, she got 20% of the primary vote, but everybody else who might have wanted to run in that seat was basically told to stand down, and it's Sinema's turn. This is just what the Arizona Democratic Party does, because it's what all the parties do. It's well, to some extent anyway, especially like the state and the national Democratic parties. It's how they operate. It's just like how they do stuff. And if you say that this is crazy or this is wrong, a lot of people will say like, what's wrong with you, Scott? That's just how it goes. Of course it was her time. And so and fucking Mark Kelly, he announced, and when he announced he was running, it was basically decided before he announced, all the other people who could have run were kind of talked to, and they're sitting, it's like, you really want to not run. And when I say all the other people who could have run, sure, some random Jane Smith could have run. But I'm talking about people who are in the state legislature or sitting representatives. And these are people who could have really viably contended, or people who had statewide offices or whatever. These people were essentially told by the party, like, we really don't, it's Mark Kelly's turn. If you want to like tee things up in 4 or 6 years, maybe you could do that too. But it's Mark Kelly's turn. Don't run. And so he makes his announcement. He's instantly, overnight, because, I mean, it's like the fucking getting on the New York Times bestseller list. You have all the donors teed up, and then you announce. They all give you money, and now it's like, oh, suddenly we've got millions of dollars in campaign contributions. And magically, we get to the primary, and, well, you know what? There's no one else who's qualified, so there's not going to be a primary. It's just going to be you. And you look at that, and then it's like, I mean, the situation that it puts you in is you end up with him and then some horrible fucking Republican. And in November, just like in 2020 and just like every other time, it's like Joe Biden, who's a piece of shit, who I honestly like feel is, I mean, just for the plagiarism. Don't get in the whole audacity of the grope, creepy motherfucker shit. Don't get into the crime bill and the racism and all this stuff. Just for the fucking plagiarism alone. Although any of those other things alone are enough. But just for that. I never want to vote for the guy. I never, ever, ever want to support him. I felt compelled to vote for the motherfucker because the alternative is fucking Trump. And as I see it, I mean, it's like, okay, we have this situation where it's going to be Mark Kelly in the fall or some horrible Republican. and then I'm going to feel compelled to vote for him because the party, as far as I'm concerned, like, yeah, the Republicans are horrible. The Democrats forcing this choice on me have essentially put a gun to my head. Their gun is, you don't want this person to win. So we know you're gonna do the right thing, Scott, because it'd be a real shame if this person won. And I mean, for the fucking governor, you have Carrie Lake. Now, granted, they actually are having a primary. She's one of the contenders. Maybe she won't win. I'm afraid she will, but maybe she will. And then you have probably Katie Hobbs. And I gotta tell you, Katie Hobbs is a piece of shit. I cannot say enough negative things about her. She was just, I was just at one of the, because of the Roe, the leaked opinion, there have been a couple demonstrations. And I was at one of these, and she spoke at it down at the Capitol. And I'm listening to her, and these are some of the choice pieces of things that she said. One, and there's a big thing, there's some context here which I think is important. Like, I've been involved in Planned Parenthood and NARL and some of these pro-abortion organizations for a while. And I did say pro-abortion. And I know my sister, she's like, oh, Scott, you don't mean pro-abortion, you mean pro-choice. No, I mean pro-abortion. And the reason I say pro-abortion and the reason they say pro-abortion is because it's like saying pro any other kind of healthcare. Pro-choice and that fucking Hillary Clinton bullshit, like, what was it, safe, legal, and rare? Yeah. All of this stuff is accepting the Republican premise that, it's like murder and it's horrible and all this stuff. And like, abortion, I mean, this is an annoying thing because they have this opinion comes out and all of these women come up with these stories. And don't get me wrong, the stories are moving, and I'm not trying to in any way devalue the things that they're saying, but they're talking about how difficult the choice it was and how all of this stuff, and they're glad that they had the choice. The problem with that is that there are a lot of people who don't feel that bad about it, and they feel like it was a good thing overall, even if they had some mixed feelings. And this whole narrative that it's like bad and you don't want it, and it's like, well, we want it to be legal, but we don't, and you're kind of like tap dancing around it. When you're doing this, just like all that shit that David Plotz is saying about we have to uphold the standards of the Supreme Court, they're defining the fucking playing. They're defining the field, they're defining the rules, and you're playing into their bullshit. And sitting there and saying that you are, you're agreeing with the air quotes pro-life, who I would call pro-forced birth or worse people. You're agreeing with them. You're saying their premise, and you're saying you're basically like Republican light. If somebody is really anti-abortion, anti-choice, for pro-forced birth, if they're that person and they have an option between somebody who is like them or the whole Republican light thing that you're trying to play, they're going to take this person. They're not going to take you. It's not that complicated. It's the most frustrating and infuriating thing. Every time, and it happens so often. Like, there are so many, like, as horrible as the Republicans are, they're very good with messaging and very good with getting the Democrats to repeat and emphasize their messaging. And it's one of these things that just like, the Democrats won't say defund the police. Instead, Biden literally came out and said fund the police. The fucking New York Police Department has a $10 billion, over $10 billion a year budget. I mean, if you put this on the ranking of countries in terms of military budget, they're not like way down the list. They're shockingly, scarily high for a fucking city, not a city-state, but a fucking city. And they have this, and they can't do fucking shit when there are mass shooters in the subway. There's a whole myth that police actually make us safer, and when you look at the numbers, they don't. Fundamentally, they don't. 95%, and I'm not just pulling a number out of my ass there, by the way, I've done the research. 95% of what police do has nothing to do with violent crime, and it has nothing to do with active crime. And then you tease apart that 5%, and this is very consistent whether you look at some tiny podunk police department or the New York Police Department. There are variations on it, but it's like within the reasonable error bars. That 5%, most of that is not like actually involved in somebody doing something. It's, kind of after the fact. And then you sort of tease this apart even further, and when they're involved in something bad, they're generally speaking not actually preventing anything. They're not doing anything. It's kind of annoying. It's right up there with the whole myth that being a cop is a dangerous job. I mean, yeah, it's dangerous. Most of the cops who died, air quotes, in the line of duty in the last 2 years died of fucking COVID because they wouldn't get vaccinated, because they wouldn't wear a fucking mask, and they're out there exposing the public to their plague germs, And it's infuriating. And before that, most of the cops that died, and this is, I think, now number 2, died in traffic accidents, crashes. Often because they pulled somebody over for no reason, and they're on the side of the road. Traffic is dangerous, and they needed to harass, more often than not, somebody who was black or brown or poor, and they're just out there fucking somebody over, and oops, they got clipped by a car. And then you start looking at like shootings on the job. It happens. It does happen. It's not, but you compare that to the number of people that cops kill. People murdered by cops versus cops getting murdered. It's not like a little, it's not balanced. It's a lopsided thing. They're killing a ton of people. They're getting killed occasionally, but not much. And you look at the numbers, and again, I mean, jobs that everyone thinks of as horribly, like super risky, like crazy dangerous, like working on a farm or collecting recycling. These are more dangerous jobs, and not by like it's not like they're close, by like a 2-to-1 margin, more dangerous than being a cop. And I can't fucking take it. I can't take the fact that the Democrats shirk away from this. And then it's like, well, this has bad associations and it's bad mojo to say defund the police or abolish the police, Scott. Why are you saying all cops are bad or all cops are bastards? And I'm saying it because it's fucking true. If you don't want it to be true, there are things that could be done, but those things start with defunding the fucking police. And, I mean, you look at the things that they actually do, and you look at what could be done. I mean, first off, a lot of the shit that they do could just be thrown out immediately. And then most of the stuff that they do could either be done by social workers or other people who are, not fucking armed, not, sitting there in body armor, not going, and it's just totally unnecessary for most of the stuff that they're doing. And that you could also hire, like, one of the things that's funny about cops is if you've ever had anything stolen and then you call the cops and you report it, okay, you can file a police report and that'll help the insurance company give you money. But the cops will laugh at you if you ask, like, is there any chance of my shit getting recovered? And this is, never mind if you were raped. Rape kits just are sitting on the shelf. The detectives are not trained detectives for the most part. They're just like cops that kind of get in this role, and they're not really that focused on actually doing detective work. If they were doing that, then I would feel better about that. But those are also people who don't need a gun. You don't, if you're investigating this kind of stuff, 99.99% of the time, that gun is pointless. Having all the body armor, all of the other shit is not something you need. You're just like really doing detective work. Sherlock Holmes is not like dressed like a fucking mercenary. So anyway, blathering on. Biden, shithead, just trying to recollect where I was. Yes, Katie Hobbs. So I'm at this fucking talk, and all the other speakers, there was one, to be fair, there was one speaker who was trying to get the crowd riled up and was telling us to do some kind of weird dance thing. And I'm not a pep rally guy. I've never been a pep rally guy. In high school, it was miserable for me. I would never voluntarily go to anything like that. This part I didn't like. All the other speakers, powerful, gave good speeches. They're talking about, even if they're talking about how an abortion was difficult for them, very good. And like one of them is sitting there saying like, I came from a religious background and ended up, and this is a much more common story for abortions than anything, but she ended up having a medical problem which was going to lead to a miscarriage at some point. And that point could have been months down the road, but there was no telling when it was going to be. And the care that she had, in air quotes care, was basically just going to let her sit there and wait it out until either spontaneously miscarried, or it was probably going to be developed enough that it would be a big enough thing that would have to have surgery or at least some assistance, and then still a DNC and all this kind of stuff. And then she ended up going to Planned Parenthood, got the procedure, and it was okay. And wasn't told all these other things. And it was just like, you listen to this story and you're like, Jesus fuck, this is, I mean, taking this shit away is vile. It is evil. And they do it under the guise of caring about kids. And I understand, like there's no point in maintaining the norms and all this. There's no point in calling out their hypocrisy, but it's so bad that, if they actually gave the slightest fuck about life and people, they would care about living people. They would care about living children. They would care about, like, WIC would be like, they fund that shit. Give them all the money. Give them health care. Give them all the things that, and instead, the same people who are like, no, you can't do that. It's murder. Wearing a condom is murder because you're killing the potential fertilized egg, I mean, I'm saying that kind of as a joke, but these people are like crazy enough that that's not that far from where some of them are. And that's murder. But then helping people, who are actually alive and born and independent and all of this, and not a blastomere, we can't do that. That's like a bridge too far. You can't do that. No. It's just like, it's just infuriating. And the thing that the people that I'm most bothered by are not those people who are just liars and fuckwads. It's the fucking people like David Plotz. I'm sorry to pick on you, but David fucking Plotz sitting there saying this shit and giving them cover and taking them seriously, instead of saying, you people, like, just like the defund the police. If the Democrats got together and as a chorus said, defund the police because of this and this and this, and made a case and said, you're not gonna have crime spike, you're gonna have, we're gonna do this is what we're gonna do, and we're actually going to end up spending less money, but we're gonna invest heavily in these other things, and we're gonna actually put money in the things that do prevent crime, which are things like social services and education and, helping people. It's crazy, but they actually, those are things that empirically prevent crime. Police don't prevent crime. It's funny, you look at that thing when one cop got killed in New York a while back, and one cop, and obviously, like, every death is tragic and all of this, but, like, one cop, and then they had the whole fucking city occupied, and you see, it's like, what is it, like 70,000 of these people on the streets or something, like, I don't know what the number is, I'm just pulling that one out of my ass, I'm probably misremembering, but it is like a fucking Nazi parade. And also, like, during this, of course, one of the things the cops in New York are notorious for is fucking over people who can't pay subway fare and they skip the fare. And while the cops are going through, they're just like escorting them all through, waving them by without paying the subway fare. And you see that and you're like, yeah, stop fucking coddling these people. It's not that you should call them out on their hypocrisy. It's that you should stop pretending, stop like accepting the shit that they're saying at face value and take it, as it is. So anyway, I'm sorry to blather on about this, but Hobbs is there, took a big fucking steaming dump. Like, I don't think she should have been there. And she said something that, like a couple platitudes. And then she said, And again, I am enthusiastically pro-abortion. Hard stop. I say this, I mean it, and I say this not just because I've arrived at it independently, but because I've listened to a lot of people talking about it and who say the same thing, and they say it for good reasons, which I've kind of laid out. They would do a better job of explaining it, but yeah. And so Hobbs is up there, and she said she is enthusiastically pro-choice, which, not that she's pro-choice, but enthusiastically pro-choice. Now, it's interesting because I have the context of knowing that people say enthusiastically pro-abortion. And so it's like screaming like a fucking klaxon in my head. Enthusiastically pro-choice, enthusiastic. Yeah, and I'm hearing that and I'm like, you fucking horrible person. Because I know she is deliberately not saying this. And she's not just saying she's pro-choice, but she's using the terminology but deliberately changing the word, which I know sounds like I'm just getting obsessed about something that's nothing. But this to me screams that she is full of fucking shit. Not that I didn't think she was full of shit before, but she does not give a fuck about abortion other than, and reproductive rights, other than she is a soulless politician who is cynical as fuck and said to herself, there's gonna be a big crowd, I can get up there in front of that crowd and I can say some shit. And I'm just gonna get up there and give a speech. And when I give my speech, I'm not even gonna use the right words, I'm not even gonna pretend, I'm going to deliberately say this shit that covers my ass because I don't want to, you can see the calculus in her mind, which I'm not convinced is valid logic, but you can tell the logic in her mind is, I'm going to say this because if I say this, then this is going to happen. And it's just like, this is not a person of convictions. And I mean, this is a person who also is such a fucking believer in democracy that I'm never going to forgive her for this. In the primary, when she became Secretary of State, there were at least 3 other candidates. I knew them, and I was out there campaigning for myself, trying to, and not even campaigning, but like going to events and things. And you see people over and over again. These people went out and busted their ass for a statewide race to get thousands of signatures to get on the fucking ballot. Just to go into the primary, not to like get ushered in, not to win automatically, but to get on the fucking ballot. They went out, busted their ass, did this stuff, put time and effort into it, got the signatures. And then, as a dirty trick, not even Katie Hobbs, but someone who you look into and it's obviously like someone from the campaign. I don't remember the details exactly, but it was just like a thin, like almost no membrane between her and Katie Hobbs. I think it was her, whoever it was, and Katie Hobbs. It was obviously someone who was, like instrumental in the campaign, doing this as a proxy, made a signature challenge against these people, which, and again, I understand. This is a standard thing politicians do, Scott. Well, that's just part of the game. The fact that that's part of the game is why people fucking hate politicians. It's one of the reasons why so many people don't vote. It's one of the reasons why nobody, or voting for no one, would have won in 2016 and in 2020. It's just like, people don't like this. It's not good, it's not fair. It's one thing to make and I understand it. I am more bothered by this than a lot of people. To me, a signature challenge, it implies that you're alleging that someone has committed fraud. Now, yeah, technically that's, they're like, well, what's really happening is that somebody fucked up they put their old address here, or somebody wrote outside of the box, and so that's an invalid signature. Or somebody put their zip code where the date goes, or, like flipped a little thing around, and we're gonna strike that signature. Those are the signatures that get invalidated are those things. But you are accusing somebody of fraud, which to me is a very serious, like, I take that shit seriously. I take fraud seriously, I take fucking plagiarism seriously, and accusing somebody of fraud carries with it some weight. And when you're doing it as a false accusation, you're doing 2 things. One, it is just underhanded and despicable. It's disgusting to accuse somebody of a crime, like literally a fucking federal crime that is horribly unethical. And you're not doing it because they've committed a crime, but you're doing it as just a simple political calculation that you can do this, they won't be able to fight it because it'll be fucking expensive. They don't have the legal resources, or maybe they don't have enough margin on the signatures, and just by the very stringent rules of the signatures, they're enough with like a line outside of the box that gets struck through that they won't have enough signatures that are air quotes valid to stay on the ballot. And then you don't have to face them in the primary. That's literally the fucking calculation. And not only that, you're such a chicken shit that you're, instead of doing this shit, coming out and saying, yes, I'm Katie Hobbs, and I'm going to do this underhanded political game to take people off so I don't have to face people at the ballot in the primary. Instead of that, you get some proxy that anyone who takes half a minute to look at it can see is basically operating for you to do it. It's chicken shit, it's cowardly, it's underhanded, it's disgusting, and it is unacceptable. I'm never voting for that motherfucker. Not. Yeah, and I'm sorry, like, I understand, like, Carrie Lake might be the opponent. I'm not gonna vote for Carrie Lake, but I'm not gonna vote for fucking Katie Hobbs if she makes this fucking primary. Which is one reason why I'm going to campaign against her. And apparently, per the, well, I don't know if I should say this. I know someone at Planned Parenthood on the committee for endorsements, and per her, Lieberman, I think, is one of the, I hope that's the right name. There are 3 candidates. I think, I can't even remember. I know Katie Hobbs because I loathe the fucking person. And then there's a guy who, there are 2 other dudes. I think it's Lieberman. Whatever the fuck his name is. My friend in Planned Parenthood said he got angry during his interview in a very bad, negative way. And basically, like, anyone but him. It's literally in her profile on Twitter. And so there's a 3rd guy. I'm voting for him. I'm gonna tell people to vote for him because vote for this motherfucker, and because I'm not gonna vote for her. And it was horrible because there were so many people at that rally going, hey, yay, Katie, yeah. It's so, like, I don't know. I see this on Twitter all the time, and I know it shouldn't bother me so much, but there are a bunch of people. Sean King is like one of the. Sean King makes all these tweets, and if you look at his tweets, they look great. Yeah, I was a mutual of his for a long time, and he sounds great. And then you find out, like, you look into it, he's actually a kind of bad person, and a lot of bad stuff going on around him. And so, yeah, I see people who aren't, like, in the know, so to speak, and they keep retweeting him, and you're like, I hate to tell you, this is kind of not. There's a, what's his name, Mohammed Safi, something like this. It would be horrible if I'm giving the wrong name, and that's. But there are the one that I'm thinking of has all these tweets that are like super viral, and they're all like, yes, I love your tweet. And then you look at the source of those tweets, and it's like a lot of them are just pure plagiarism, like, which I don't know if I've mentioned this. I'm not a fan of plagiarism. And so, you see people, but people retweet this stuff because they don't know the context. People are going, yay, Katie, and it's such a fucking shallow understanding. It's like, okay, so she's a woman and she's in this nice. It's the same shit with fucking cinema. At least cinema, like, people can see it a little bit more. But Katie Hobbs is right up there. Like, I mean, she's basically, there's that Office meme where it's like they're the same picture. You put her next to cinema, and it's like I cannot tell the difference in any, in terms of who they are. It's annoying too because as Secretary of State, there are a ton of things that someone who cared could have done that would have made the fucking state better. And especially for elections, there are a ton of things and if she would have done it, I'd have been all for her. Even with, I mean, it's the thing. I'm talking about this signature challenge thing as though that was the only reason. There are a bunch of other reasons. That's just like the nucleus that, like, really, irked me. And then there are all these other layers on top of that that just like, ugh, just terrible person. And literally, like, she wanted to be secretary. The thing about Secretary of State is that there are some people who run for that office because they want to do the stuff that the Secretary of State does. And there are a lot of people that run for Secretary of State because it's a stepping stone to being the governor. And like in her case, do the math. Which one do you think is? It's just like, I don't know. It just fucking annoys me. I wish people knew more. I wish people were more critical. Be more fucking critical. And, don't, like, even the stuff that I'm saying. If something I'm saying sounds like bullshit, you're like, oh, Scott, that signature challenge thing sounds like bullshit. Look that shit up. Look that shit up. You can do it. I implore you, be critical, including of the stuff that I'm saying, not because I'm bullshitting you, but specifically because I'm telling you stuff that is true that I want you to check because it's true. And I don't want you to take what I'm saying at face value, and I certainly don't want you to take what Katie Hobbs is saying at face value. Because again, she is not a fucking ally. She will not, I mean, just like the only reason I could justify voting for Sinema in the primary I voted for, in the general, I'm trying to say, the only reason I could do that is that after a shit ton of arm twisting, she finally said, because this was about the time that Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings were going on, and people kept asking her, like, would you confirm? And her vote was always, or her response was always like, well, I'm not there, so I can't decide. And then finally she came out and said, really half-heartedly, kind of like weak sauce, okay, I'd vote against them. I still don't believe her, to be honest, but at least she said it. That was a box I could check, and then I could go like, okay, I'm gonna hold my nose and vote for this horrible person, at least knowing that this is the case. At least being able to tell myself that this is the case. Not an ally. This is, if she actually gave a shit, codifying Roe would be up there, reforming the court would be up there. I mean, there's a thing, again, like the Democrats not doing that shit. And then you look at 2022 and 2024 and the fucking Supreme Court, and you think about Bush Gore in 2000, that Supreme Court is gonna make a fucking decision probably. And it's not gonna be a good decision for us. And I'm not saying that's quite ball game. Like, things can get very bad and then get better, but things don't need to get that bad. It'd be really nice not to let things get that bad. Okay, you guys are just gonna fucking drive us over the cliff. That's great. I hope that eventually, after the train goes over the cliff and blows up and gets torn to pieces and all this kind of stuff, when you rebuild, it'll be better, I hope, maybe. But it'd be nice not to have to go through that shit. Why go through the exercise? Why go through the exercise of letting, global warming just fucking hit the gas on that? Don't worry about it. We're gonna spend a little bit of money on climate change and global warming, and the rest, we're gonna spend twice that much money, or I'm exaggerating maybe about the twice, but not that big of an exaggeration. We're gonna spend a lot more money on Ukraine and give them just shit tons of billions of dollars. And I'm not saying that, Ukraine doesn't need help or shouldn't get help, but the fucking climate is going to fuck us all. Probably should do something about that shit. You're in a position to do something about that shit. And it's the most infuriating shit because you have the people like Sinema. You have the people like Schumer is, again, like, he's one of those guys, he'll say stuff that you're kind of like, okay, you got me kind of a little bit. But still, like, these people, certainly Biden, they're not taking this shit seriously. And what do they give a fuck? Like, I don't think that these are people who really give that much of a shit about their grandkids, who I think, they care about themselves in the moment and not enough about anyone else to go like, this is kind of a big deal. We should do something about that. This whole pandemic thing is kind of a big deal. Maybe we should do something about that. Instead of that, it's like, no, we're going to lean on the fucking CDC director. And, instead of having this red map that's all scary, we're going to make a map that doesn't even go to red. It just goes to orange. And it's based on a statistic that A, it lags, and B, it systematically underestimates the severity of transmission and risk in communities. And so we're not going to fix the thing. We're just going to change the metrics to make it look like we fixed it. Like, you look at that and it's like you motherfuckers. Like, what happened to listen to the science? It's just, for them, it's literally just a box that they can tick, a bullet point they can put on the campaign literature. And then they know that those people who are the low information voters are going to go like, yay, Katie, without knowing any fucking thing about her. Yay, Joe. Yo, Joe. And they know that. And then they just, I'm sorry to get incensed about this, but I'm just like, I'm frustrated. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm fucking frustrated. And I feel like I'm sitting here, I mean, to be fair, yeah, I have a very small number of people listening to me, so it's not like, yeah, not like I'm up in front of a big crowd, but it just annoys me that I'm saying the same shit over and over again. And it's not just me. I mean, here's the thing. It's a lot of people. And you get people saying this stuff, and then people are like, well, you know, why are you so against the Democrats? And this is the most fucking, like, I'm trying to help you motherfuckers. I'm trying to tell you, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe do something about the fact that the Republicans are trying to systematically steal elections, and they're working at it at the state legislature, they're working at it at the Supreme Court level, they're working at, you know, like, every fucking level. And not only that, they're sitting there, you know, doing things like letting the CEO of Exxon basically conspire with, they basically have a cartel. So they're going to charge a shit ton for oil and gas. And in the process, they're going to have record profits. And everybody's going to blame Biden because people are fucking, again, shallow, you know, not even looking below the surface. It's just like, well, Biden's in charge and the gas prices are high. So that's, like, it's just so fucking dumb. So dumb all around. Anyway, with that, God, and then motherfucking Elon Musk. This is just the cherry on top. So Elon Musk, I don't know what, like a week ago or so, a few days ago, whatever it was, tweets that, like, people are going to say some things about me because I'm going to come out and I'm going to say that now I'm a Republican, and, you know, like, now they're going to say a bunch of shit about me. And then it comes out like, oh, he paid 250 grand to somebody who he exposed himself to. Yeah. It's like, yeah, I don't think that's a dirty trick. I think you actually did that shit. And you said this stuff because you knew that the fucking Republicans are the party to go to when you're a sex offender. You know, although, again, like, obviously Biden, not the greatest guy. Yeah, he's got some shit there as well. But the Democrats, at least nominally, aren't cool with that. Whereas the Republicans, they're like, yeah, come in, do your thing. Anyway, it's just like, motherfucker. The only hope that I have there, like, frankly, like, Tesla, their share price has gone down from like 900 something to like 600 something. And Twitter is going to sue him because he made an offer based on a ridiculously high share price. And the whole thing that he was going to use to finance that was his Tesla stock that he was going to have basically as collateral to get big loans. And now the Tesla stock is worth a hell of a lot less. So those loans are, you know, and then he started thinking, it would be awesome if that Tesla stock just fucking craters, and then he still gets forced to pay the price that he was going to pay for Twitter. And then everybody fucking leaves Twitter, because I know I sure as fuck would if he actually gets control of it. Not that it's good now, but, you know, that would be like, okay, pleasant knowing you. Have a nice life. Go off the fucking cliff. If he did that, it ended up bankrupting him and fucking him over, and I would be thrilled. I'd be so fucking thrilled. Like, it would be, and again, I don't think there's karma. I don't think that there's any kind of inherent justice in the universe other than what we impose ourselves. But it'd give you a pause. It'd be like, maybe there's a twinge of hope for that. I think there's hope in general, but maybe like for those things. Anyway, with that, I think I've gone on quite a long time now, and I am tired of standing. It is one of the more annoying things that I noticed this starting when I was trying to run for Congress, and I was standing in front of people's doors, talking to them, canvassing, and just standing is, I'm not saying it hurts, but like my back hurts a little bit from standing. I need to move around. So I need to move around, and you probably need to stop, hearing me blather in your ears. So with that, thank you as always. I always appreciate it. And actually, thank you I have a YouTube subscriber. Well, I've had some before, but got a new one, and it was somebody that I didn't know. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope that this is worth it. I have a couple of other videos that I haven't put up yet. They're in my podcast feed, but the lighting, at some point, Adobe Premiere turned on HDR, high density. I'm not even gonna say it. They turned on the wider luminosity gamut, essentially. So the images in there, in the videos that I have, they're not overexposed, but they look blasted out. And I can go in with curves and kind of adjust them and make them look okay. I can put in a filter. There are ways to deal with that, but it's just, I'm not saying it's like days worth of work, but it's enough extra work to put those videos out that I haven't done it yet, and I'm sorry for that. I'm very busy, and I will try to get those together. I will definitely put this one up though, because I am just so fucking annoyed with this stuff, and I know it's been a few weeks, and I will try to get those out maybe this weekend or something. I don't know, we'll see. But with that, thank you as always. I do appreciate it, and enjoyed lunch today, Gil. So thanks. Zai Jen.